Today's panel session will be done with our GAMFED members, chaired by Rakshith Bhagavath, Director of Gentle Bamboo Solutions, which focuses on developing game-based solutions for corporates. And he's joined today by, hopefully soon, Ridvan Saglam, a freelance learning experience designer. There he is. I can see him coming on. Bring him online as well.
All right.
And we have also Andrew Lau, CEO and founder of Think Codex, and lastly, Sufiz, Mohd Suffian, Gamification Behavioural Design Consultant at Recur. Now, leave the rest to you, Rakshith.
Thank you, Albert. Hey, everyone. It feels a little awkward right now to be following Olkaito after that brilliant talk with so many great examples of how gamification has been applied into customer experience. And we are starting this panel with an assertion. If you look at the title of the panel, it is, why has gamification not caught on in marketing and customer experience? And if you just bear with us for a little while, I think my assertion here is this, that, gamification has not really caught on in marketing and customer experience. And the great examples that you do see and hear are still a little bit the exception and not the norm. And that a lot of this has to be brought into the mainstream. And over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, hopefully, we will either be proven wrong, and this panel here that's greatly equipped will give us some wonderful ways in which gamification has caught on, or hopefully we'll find a way for why it hasn't and how we can make it more mainstream, right? So that is what we're going to try and do. And very quickly, to sort of set context, we have Andrew, Sufiz, and Ridvan. Wonderful. Hey guys, do you want to say a quick hello before I throw some questions and have a conversation with all of you? Andrew?
Hello.
Hey, Ridvan.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Andrew. All right. So I'll start with this question for all three of you, because that's the assertion that gamification has not really caught on in customer experience in marketing. I'll go in alphabetical order, first with Andrew, then Ridvan, and then finally Sufiz. Your thoughts on whether this assertion makes sense? Do you agree? Do you not agree? Has gamification caught on in marketing and customer experience? Andrew?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Rakshith. I think from my perspective, because I spent quite a number of years on the other side as a marketer, and we deal with a lot of agencies, ad agencies, digital agencies as well. What we find is that gamification might be a bit here and there, but it's never in a structured manner. So there become elements here and there, but we've not seen any agency that come and say, we are a gamification ad agency or we're a gamification creative agency in that sense. I see very little to none of that. And when I ask my other colleagues in FMCGs, in other oil and gas companies, it's pretty much the same essentially, right? So I think there are remnants of it here and there. There's some pockets, but it is not widely practiced. This is what it is. And it's not structured in a way where people recognize it as gamification. So people might recognize it, it's just some fun thing that you can do with a customer.
So they're in pockets, but not really structured, right? That's the point. I'll come to you, Ridvan, and I know you've done quite a bit of work in the field of creating personas, customer profiles, and using that to build some great products and creating solutions that tie to business goals. So what has your experience been like? Have you found a way to create structure, the issue that Andrew was talking about, or is that your experience as well?
The thing is, the main area I work on is education and training. So I create learning experiences for my customers. And when it comes to training and or education, we can say that gamification has more acceptance. But when it comes to marketing, we can't. Yeah, it has definitely a place. Since there are many companies, they offer some, gameful experiences and ready-to-go solutions. Like, what was the name of that? The Gamify. So they have some ready solutions. But here's the thing: in training or education, the other side, the customers, they know that a behavior change takes time. But in marketing, everything has to be very fast. So, but on the other side, if you want to create a gamified experience, it takes time. So you have to make a lot of research, and you have to study on the personas, and you have to create, the targets. And probably we can say that the companies, they don't want to invest that much time. And when we check the examples which we have seen, and most of them, we can say that they are not successful because they don't invest enough time on it.
So essentially, with education, because these experiences are created over time, and there is a lot of time for people to learn, there is time for people to understand the experience. Whereas in marketing, you need real quick results, and you need results right away, and so that does not give the time.
Yes, and also, the companies, they know that, for example, when they ask me to create a gamified experience for them, they know that it takes time to see the results and to see the change. But in marketing, they expect those solutions, those outcomes very quickly. And, the trends are changing very fast. And while you're working on a gamified project, or maybe the trends will change, and then it will be useless.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point, and I kind of want to, and thank you for bringing that sort of a comparison between learning and development and marketing. And I would want to throw that to Sufiz. Sufiz, I know you come with a lot of experience across different industries. You've worked on all sorts of things, from product design to customer experiences to community gamification to employee engagement to L&D. So, do you see some echoes in what Ridvan has said? What has your experience been like?
So from my experience, I agree with what Ridvan has said, is that most of gamification has been applied in L&D. So I'm based in Malaysia, and I operate in the region. I work with some companies in the West as well. And it's still kind of common to see L&D being the main kind of like reference when it comes to gamification. But the reality is that a lot of companies are slowly becoming more aware of gamification. But the main issue with that is that there's a gap in knowing what it is and knowing what to do with it, right? So I have had the opportunity to speak with a lot of companies, and they come to me and say, like, look, we really want to gamify whatever experience that we have, a product, whether it's in-store experience or a virtual experience, but we don't know how to do it. And they don't know how to expect what outcomes can come from it, right? So like what Ridvan was saying, that they tend to want immediate results. And we have to manage the expectation, saying, look, if you want to say get people to buy your products, then it's not that straight to the point. People respond better to things like discounts or promotions and stuff like that. But if you want to get brand awareness or a positive association with the brand and things like that, then gamification is a better route for you. And it can give you that sort of outcome a lot quicker as well. So for example, I can't mention the projects I'm working on due to NDA, but so I've had some companies come up to me and say, look, we're trying to create an experience, a virtual experience, right? So it could be, for example, either a conference event, like what we're doing today. But instead of just coming, listening to speakers and all that, how can we make it gamified? How do we get people to walk around the space and do something meaningful? So that's where, especially when the pandemic came along, gamification started coming center stage a lot more, because they could not really speak to the customers and sell their products through an engaging conversation, right? You can't do that sort of interaction online. So they wanted to use something else, and gamification tend to be the main option that they went for. But they didn't know how to do it. So they always fell back on the typical things like, how many points should we award for this? How many rewards should we give them? We give them the best discounts. And I think most of my clients, if not all of them, will say, look, how much should we give them in terms of discounts? And I said, look, you can, but it sends the wrong message. So, but at the same time, you have also smaller companies who are starting to adopt gamification, whether intentionally or not. If you look at social media, for example, with things like Facebook, you can like and share things, and Instagram with your being able to create polls on Insta stories and all that. People have been using that to kind of create little games and little activities. The other day, I saw a furniture store that I patron frequently when I was furnishing my home. They did a little kind of gamified activity on their Insta story where basically say like, "Oh, can you spot the difference? Or can you tell us which one looks out of place, or where do you see this has been appeared somewhere before in our stories and stuff like that?" And people really engaged, and it was cheap, it was free to do, and the engagement was there, and that's in my books gamification already. So it's there. It's either they do it by accident or they're doing it intentionally, but they don't really know how to go about it properly, whatever properly really means, right?
That's interesting. I think you brought up 2 points there that one of which I want to come back to a little later. You talked about how the pandemic is creating opportunities, and I'll come back to that a little later. But another point you made was how they might be doing this intentionally or not. And that kind of ties to what Andrew was saying earlier about, there not being a lot of structure to gamification in customer experience. It brings me to a thought I had. I mean, my colleague pointed me out to this example, and Sufiz shared some really good examples of how gamification is a part of customer experience. One of my colleagues, who's an educator on a platform called Unacademy that's based out of India, we're based out of India here, and he's an educator on that platform. So one of the stakeholders, right, of that platform. There's this really interesting feature that they created, which is that in a program of sorts, in any training session, where the students typically interact with the emoticons, on the day of the educator's birthday, without the educator knowing, another emoticon was added to the interface, which had a birthday cake. And as soon as this educator walked in and started the session online, you had all of these different people responding with that emoticon. Just one click and a quick wish. And you can imagine the kind of surprise and delight it brings into the educator's face, right? And that's a simple integration of sorts, but with a lot of thought to it. So I'll come to you, Andrew, and throw this back to you. On the one hand, you see the simple, easy to do points, badges, leaderboards. There is some structure that's been created over time for it. And therefore, probably you see a lot more companies using it. And then there's the more thoughtful experiences, which, like Ridvan pointed out, take time to figure out and integrate into the customer experience. What is your opinion on why PBL has become the norm, and what can we do to kind of break out of that mold of simply going after points, badges, and leaderboards?
Right. So I think the point and badges and leaderboards, they're very simple because not only gamification companies are using it, it's been around for a long while, right? Even before gamification become a well-known terminology. So gamification itself is about 15, 20 years old, but way before that, this has been around. And because when we talk about marketing, when we run campaigns and everything, it's typically transactional. So as Ridvan say, that people want things fast, and the easiest way is to make things tangible. And what's tangible is statistics. What statistics? Statistics is points, right? And leaderboard. So those are very tangible, and it's very easy to make gamification very transactional. So marketers want things to be transactional because at the end of the day, they want either impressions, they want either conversions, or those type of things, right? That they are looking for, right? Now, if you're talking to them about, all right, so this will be able to do this brand building. Here's the next problem, right? They may have metrics from other methodologies, but with gamification, I see little to none actual research metrics that shows that if you use gamification versus another, use an influencer, those type of things, the brand is building is much stronger on the influencer side. So in one sense, the other more used tools have more researched and more solid metrics to use. And to a marketer, it's quite simple, right? Which one can prove and give me results? Because at the end of the day, as a marketer, I'm selling stuff, right? Or I'm helping the sales team to sell stuff. That's kind of how it is. So that's why PBL is a norm. It's simple, it's transactional, and anything beyond that, the tried and tested methods are a lot more reliable, right? And in a sense, that's the responsibility of gamification companies to educate, right? And educate we also need to convince, right? And when we need to convince, you need to have use cases. And the problem is you can't convince without use cases, and without use cases, in the first place, you need to convince people to work with them so that you can have use cases. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? And that's why PBL is just the norm. And how do we move beyond this? As I mentioned, you need to come in with really solid, with solid research and solid proof, and be able to show, like, for example, why gamification is better than influencer marketing, very better than live live streaming selling, because then you get a celebrity in, right? Some of these brands from Italy and stuff like that, they get influencer in, they can sell like 200 handbags, cost a few $1 million just within 5 minutes, right? You get these China influencers coming in. So how is gamification going to go against something like that, right? So or we should carve out a niche where we're not trying to go head to head in this type of I guess market, in that sense. Yeah, so those are the things that I think we should look at. Often, I think not just in marketing, gamification has a fair bit of depth, but not enough depth against a lot of what is out there as current solutions, not just in marketing, in customer service, in learning and development. These are the things that I've noticed. Yeah.
So, if I can summarize some of the key points that you've made, essentially the idea is that when there are other tools and methods that provide proven results, why would you experiment with something like gamification, which comes across more as fun, more as aspirational, and it would be cool if it really worked, but I have no way of knowing it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, then it's a lot of money down the drain. It's a lot of time down the drain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can just quickly use a simple analogy, right? So let's say you want to
Yes.
start out a gamified video streaming website, right? That's fine, right? Here's the problem, right? We've got YouTube. Why do we want to go to your site, right? We've got YouTube, so there's it. Why? So in that sense, that's the thing, right? And unless we can prove a differentiation, right, then customers won't bite in, right? Without differentiation, if I feel it's just the same, and gamification is just gimmicky, right? You need to look from the point of the marketer, right? We cannot look at it from the lens of a gamification practitioner. You just need to look it from their lens, and they'll just say, "Oh, this is very gimmicky," right? Never mind, I already have this, right? So it's not going to fly. Yeah.
So there are two hats that you would wear here, right? One, that of the experienced designer, and I'll come to you, Ridvan, for more insight into that. And then the other hat, which is that of the business that has to go ahead and create this marketing campaign using gamification, and the role of this gamification company, which is going to use gamification in marketing. And I'll come to you, Sufiz, on that. What's the role of the business? But before I come to you, Sufiz, Ridvan, what, in your experience, when in designing these experiences, whether they are learning experience or in general customer experiences, what are some thoughts that you take into account, and how can we kind of take those lessons and put them into all customer experiences to go a little beyond points, facts, and keywords, maybe?
By the way, while listening to Andrew, I remember my first gamified projects, and I used those then too. Okay, so the points, badges, leaderboards, and I was.
So there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
I think we can agree that there's nothing wrong.
I was really excited, and I was doing something totally different. And I mean, it was about 7 or 8 years ago, and it didn't work. And the project didn't go on, and I was asking, okay, so I did everything right, so what was wrong? But then I realized that I was using those elements because they seem fancy to me, or it was easy to, as Andrew said, it was easy to implement them, because when we look at the games all around us, they're very easy to see. But here, gamification is about, all right, so it's about human psychology, but also it's about games. And in my opinion, as people who work on gamification, maybe that can be the point, and we don't play enough games. And when we check the popular games, and cooperation games, co-op games are getting more popular, and it means that people don't want to see a leaderboard there, or the points and this kind of stuff, and the challenges and beating someone, winning the game. Okay, it could be fun to win the game, but now I see that people enjoy more working together. So while creating those experiences, in my work also in GAMFED Turkey, so we use these, working together and mentoring, and when you reach a level and mentor other people and help other people, we try to use this kind of elements more. And because another thing, and I said I really point out that we should really play more games. And about 2 years ago, I realized that okay, so I use the same kind of mechanics, and most of the time they fail for some people, and because we don't put the learners, or okay, so Oljaito pointed out that, but the users, we don't put them in the center of our experience. So we should build some gamified solutions where the learner or user, where they are in the center, and where they feel valuable, and where they share their knowledge or their experience with other people. And in my opinion, one way to do this is building communities. And for example, I'd like to give an example from one community which I have been in for a long time. It is the community of the tool which I mostly use. It's Articulate Storyline community, and in that community there is a gamified system too. Every year they give hero badges to some people. But to gain this badge, okay, so there are some rules, and the rules are you have to share your knowledge, you have to help people, and you have to be, if you make a review or a comment about other works, and you have to be polite. And after a while, I didn't care about getting that hero title, but I wanted to be a part of that community, and I wanted to give my knowledge to other people, my experience to other people. And if you have, if you have a strong community, and for the products, for the companies, it can be one of the best way to promote your works and products.
So essentially building something not just for an individual customer, but for the community. Yes. And as such, that's an interesting idea. And Andrew, since you've been a part of GameFed for a really long time and you're currently the chair, any thoughts on the idea that Ridvan's just shared? How can we kind of make that a thing in customer experiences? Is it feasible to build for communities in an age of hyper personalization? Does it even make sense to build for communities, and if so, what would that even look like?
Yeah, I think it's always possible to build communities, essentially. But when we want to build communities, you need to have a very strong cause, because there's communities all around, right? Virtual communities or physical communities. And the very first part is you need to have a strong cause in why you want to have a community, and then what's in it for them, right? And you need to have some key people who are willing to drive the initial onset of answering questions and posting stuff, and those are all the things. Now, just by having gamification to be put on top of community, it helps. I would put it more of a catalyst rather than a core ingredient, right? So gamification cannot create communities, but it can be a catalyst that makes communities grow faster, and maybe makes it grow deeper at a much faster rate. So you still need that basics, right? So do I believe in what this community is about, right? Else then even points, badges, leaderboards, prizes, then I'm there not for the community. I'm there as a crowd, right? I'm just an observer. I may play some games there, win some stuff, but I'm not committed. So the key thing is then you can't differentiate between the community and the crowd, because in the crowd people are just there for their own specific reasons, and then they leave in a sense, right? So that's kind of how I see, if you're going to use gamification, it needs to be a catalyst, but you need to get the basics right from there. Yeah.
So gamification essentially being an enabler of the experience and not cannot really in any way replace the experience or the strength of the product itself. The strength of the product cannot be its gamification. It's just one of the USPs, so to speak. It cannot be, cannot replace the product itself, right?
Yeah, just like, since we're talking about marketing, so great marketing cannot really help out if the product's really lousy, right? So you can have great marketing, you can pour a lot of dollars, but if the product's lousy, sooner or later word will get out, right? This thing doesn't work, no matter how much you pour into it. So the same with gamification. You can't just, it's not a magic pill that, or some fairy dust that you can just sprinkle and everything just turns out that way.
So here's a hypothetical then, and I'll come to you, Sufiz, on this. Let's say that we've built a product or a platform and an experience, and you want to make that experience great now, and you know that when done right, when thought through, gamification can add that value. What does a company need to see, and what kind of leadership does a company need to have to go ahead and invest in something like gamification for that customer experience?
So based on my experience, in fact, what the main thing that the management, or at least the leadership of the organization, needs to see is the importance of having the experience be the first thing, right? So it's not just about how many things we sell, about how technologically advanced our platform or solution is, which tends to be the focus for some people. It's all about how great is the experience and how engaging it can be. And a lot of people assume that the more tech you stuff into something, the better it becomes, but the opposite becomes true. It's kind of like, now people are talking about metaverse and VR, right? You can have a VR virtual room, but if it's a very technologically advanced product, you come in, it's still an empty room. It's about what you put inside. So you have to first look at, okay, what am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to get people to give me their data, whether it's their emails? Am I trying to get people to get more people on board? Am I trying to get long-term retention, and so on and so forth? Then once you understand that, PBLs are something that you only consider once you figured out what is the main experience you want to create, right? So I'll give one example. Can't mention the client again. It's a multinational, Fortune 500. But basically, they wanted to create a virtual experience to promote their product, when their product is a very controlled product, in fact. So there are a lot of things that we had to kind of skirt around without getting in trouble with the authorities. But the main focus was about getting the brand association, right? And positive association as well. And what we did is, we had some elements of PBLs, but the PBLs were meant to be just a kind of like part of the tools in the toolbox. The main storyline was there. So we had to create a story, and the story was to kind of get people to connect with the product and the theme that they had chosen. And the theme, let's just say the theme and the product have nothing in common. So let's say you're selling like diapers and you're linking it to, say, space travel, for example. It's really unrelated. So we were given this task. We're like, okay, how do we link the two? Then we created a story and a theme, and we use that to connect everything together. And when they come in, they don't just get baffled by the whole thing. They feel like, okay, I know I'm here. I follow the storyline. I see the characters. I see the point of everything being linked together. And then the PBLs are there to kind of keep track of things, right? So then it gives context to your actions. For example, when you are awarded points for something, if I log in and I get 5 points for that, what does that mean? Does that mean 5 points is a lot, or is it a little bit? So there's no anchor to that. But when you are doing something that's difficult, that experience, which is given purpose and meaning by the storyline that you've created, then you realize, okay, these points are actually a lot, and these points are actually not that much. And then the whole badges thing also gives purpose, because when you overcome a milestone in the story, or you hit a certain point in the story where something happens or a plot is achieved, and then you get that badge, you're like, okay, yes, I did something, right? So you can use PBLs. It just all matters is that what is it for? What does it signify? And that's what people tend to misunderstand. And we can't blame them, because when I speak to people who are still kind of venturing to gamification for the first time, the first thing they tell me is that, look, I've done a lot of research on gamification, and all I know is that it's all about PBLs. And I'm like, it is, by definition, it is gamification, but it's not by itself, it's not enough, right? It can be enough, maybe, if you're lucky enough, you've created something and it just fits. But 99% of the time, it doesn't work that way. Most times they say, look, I tried gamification, I used PBLs, it didn't work. And it only attracts a certain kind of person when you use just PBLs. And usually when you have PBLs, that's where the conversation comes back with, how much should I give as a reward? Do I give them a laptop? Do I give them a phone? Do I give them X amount of money? The reward justifies the action. So I could click a button 100 times to get 1 point. And if I get 100 points, I can get a phone. And if I really want that phone, I'm going to do it, right? But then how many people go into an experience just to win the prizes? And rather than that, they want to come in to have a good experience. It's kind of like, why do we play games? We buy the systems, like whether it's a gaming PC or a console or whatever, to play the game. And we buy the game. So we're spending money to do it. And what businesses misunderstand is that they flip it the other side. It's like, okay, I create this game, I'm going to give you the prize to make you play it, which makes no sense in most cases.
I want to follow up on that, Sufiz, and there's a question I have for all three of you. We've talked about how gamification has to enhance the experience, and you talked quite a bit just now about how the experience must be central and it's critical. But what constitutes a good experience? How does someone, when they are designing that experience, know that it is a good experience? Is it just gut, or is there a formula to it? Is there a structure to it? How do I know when I'm designing something whether it's a good experience or not? I'll come to Sufiz first, and then Andrew, and then of course Ridvan, if that's okay. Sufiz, any thoughts?
Sure. So this is a very kind of like, depending on who you are, you'll answer this question very differently, because gamification in my eyes is both an art and a science. And that's also why PBLs tend to be very popular, because they're more scientific in that sense, because it's really like, do this, get 1 point, do enough, you're on a leaderboard, you're number one, whatever, and you do certain things, get badge. But when it comes to everything else, like kind of building, whether it's just a normal game that's not even gamified, literally a game, there's a lot of artistic elements to it, right? And that becomes something where some people just don't know how to create that sort of experience, because they don't have the creative capacity for it, or they lack the imagination. So what, in my opinion, when it comes to creating a great experience, you have to first understand who your audience is and what they really care about. And that doesn't mean the rewards. It's more about what experiences do they care about. Do they care about this community? Do they want to interact with people? Then you want to have a multiplayer aspect to it. Do they care about something bigger than them? Maybe they need a sense of purpose. Maybe you need to give them an engaging storyline or a character to follow, and that character has a very interesting development throughout, and you feel connected to this character. It gives you purpose. You know what, I have to finish the story because this character has to get to this, to get to the castle or to save the whatever. So you give them that sort of purpose. Or is it really about leveling up? So you have to really understand your audience you're trying to target. But then the question then is like, what if I'm trying to target everybody? Which most companies will say, I want to get as many people as I want because that's marketing, right? Then you kind of have to have a balance of most of the things. And that's where it gets really complicated, because the more things you put in, the more convoluted it becomes. It's like kind of like, teaching them how to use it becomes very complicated, which is something that we struggle with at times. The tutorial part, the onboarding, when you come in, they're like, okay, it's great, but it's so confusing. I don't know how to get anywhere. I get lost in the experience and blah, blah, blah. So you have to make it really easy to use. So really reduce the cognitive friction in the experience. But at the same time, you want to make it really enriching as well, which means you have to add some sort of complexity as well. So the balancing act is very, very critical. And you can put as many elements as you want. You want a quest, you want missions, you want mini games inside. So a game in a game, sure, go for it. But as long as you know how to explain the journey and how to get them to understand how to use it, then it's fine. If you can't, then you might want to dial it back and see what really matters to you. And usually when it comes to gamification, any design project, right, you can't really hit 100% in the first go. So you might want to manage the client's expectations. Look, let's try this out first. If we like the response, we'll go more. If we don't like it, we'll dial back and try this instead. And as long as we hit a certain point that they find it's acceptable or they're happy with, then we'll just, we'll make the necessary adjustments and we'll just keep going, right? So it's a wait and see. Don't just build something, I built the best thing ever. Let me just sit back and relax and just let it go. You really have to sit and monitor the situation. So whenever we do projects, we always have a post-monitoring aspect to it as just part of the consultation package and say, look, we're going to sit back and have a look at what's going on. Tell us what people say, and then let's make some tweaks along the way.
Thanks, Sufiz. And I think you raised a valid concern that anyone who in business would have, which is if I try to put everything in to cater to all the different kinds of customers I might have, then you're right, it could become a very convoluted experience. So Andrew, what are your thoughts on this? Do we go mass and try to bring everyone in? Do you go niche in developing that customer experience? Where is that balance? How do you find that balance?
I think humans are quite complex and everyone has their own expectations. So unless you have a very large brand, which always begins with a niche, right? For example, Coke, right? Coca-Cola. They're a brand which is one of the most recognizable brands in the world, but they start off with a niche, right? With a certain group, and then it grows from there. So that's the typical approach, right? Coming back to the question on what makes a great experience, I think there are three things, right? Firstly, it needs to engage the senses, right? Because humans, our brains process senses, right? So if it's smell, it's a sight, it's a thought. So that's why graphics and what we hear, so what we touch. So those are it needs to engage the senses. Secondly is not just engaging the senses, it needs to evoke an emotion, right? Or emotions, right? So you need to feel happy, sad, or whatever it is. You can't just smell something and then just that's it, right? It's just flat, right? You don't feel anything, then there's something wrong, right? So senses, emotions, and last but not least, it needs to encourage or lead towards an interaction or a decision, right? If it's just very one-way type of traffic and the user is not expected to do anything or doesn't want to do anything, then you've got a lousy experience essentially, right? If you look at just basic stuff like cinema, right? It engages the senses, right? They have all those Dolby surround sounds and everything, and it evokes a certain emotion, right? So third one is that there's some sort of interaction involved in it, because if you think of it, people laugh, people cry, whatever it is, because people can identify with it. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, actually it's just a one-way traffic, right? It's just some pictures, some audio that's sent to you, right? But the experience is very different because in how they design it, it does all these three things. So in the end, so that's, for me, that's what creates a great experience, right? And of course, at the end of the day, it must be differentiated, because if I feel that it's just like any other thing out there, then I'm not even going to be bothered. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. So three things: engaging senses, evoking emotions, and that leads to an interaction or a decision. Ridvan, your thoughts on what constitutes a great experience? Because we've now heard two very interesting definitions, quite similar, but also with enough nuances.
Yeah, I would say the same things, and just maybe we can add to that, to the great experience about the personalization. And if after a great experience, it should change something in my life. Maybe something better, something bigger. I don't know. It should open a new point of view for me, and maybe through that experience, we should offer personalized ways, personalized rewards. And by this way, the participants, they will feel that we value them.
I love that point. Yeah, I love that point, especially what you just said about how it should change something in my mind and hopefully make me speak about the experience or share that experience with people, right? And that ties to an interesting question that we have in the chat. We'll see if we can get that on the screen as well. And that's this one here. Don't we want to retain customers? How much do points, badges, and leaderboards contribute to customer retention? And as the real goal of customer experience, turning them into advocates of our service or product. I'll throw this open to all three of you, whoever wants to take this up.
I'll go first if everyone's okay.
Yeah.
So I think
Sure.
I think no company will deny. Obviously, they want to retain customers. That's like, yeah, why not? But then the question is like, is there a way to measure like how much PPL contributes? I think it's kind of like, again, it's all about context. You can't just put PPLs just for the sake of it. And yeah, it could contribute to that goal, right? Retention and whatnot, or even enriching the experience, because it gives you some way of measuring some sort of progress or whatever you're trying to do in the experience. But if there is no context and you just slap a PBL on it, I think it doesn't really drive anything in particular, right? And then it goes back to like, why am I doing this? And is there a reward for it? And retention happens when you're happy with the brand, whether it's through the product or the service you get, or just you have an association with the brand. Maybe you really believe in their ethos and what they're like kind of what their existence is all about. Or maybe you just really had a really great experience with the brand, whether it's in store or with a clerk. It makes an impression on you. In this case, when it comes to gamification, I believe it gives you that experience that really can stand out from the rest. Because especially now, when not many companies are doing gamification, like at least not very hardcore, maybe doing a little bit. But if you go really all the way and you do it really well, it really stands out. And we can see a lot of companies starting to go into metaverse worlds and all that. And that's kind of gamification in some ways. It's not just being there for the sake of it. They do like some sort of gamified interactions. And they're big companies and people are paying attention, right? You can read about it. Even if you don't care about the brand or you've never been in those metaverse worlds, whether it's Decentraland or whatever it may be, you still know about it. And that's marketing, right? So, yeah.
Any other thoughts on that? Thank you, Sufiz. Any other thoughts on that? Andrew or Ridvan?
Andrew?
Yeah, I think with PBLs, they tend to be transactional in nature, right? And the problem with PBLs is they're across a lot of platforms. I mean, if you're using e-commerce platforms, everybody's using it because it's so simple, right? And here's the problem. The problem is that retention of customers comes in two forms, right? It's either a form of convenience. So convenience means as long as it's convenient, right? I have points, I can get redeem stuff from you, then I will still remain quote unquote loyal to your brand. But the moment I amass points somewhere else, or they give me more points, you're not really having what we need is commitment, right? I'm not really committed to the brand. So what you have is convenience, and a lot of companies they misinterpret convenience for commitment, right? So that's so PBLs help with convenience, but like I say, the moment that guys give you double the points, you're off away from this platform. You're going to there, right? Because double the points, or it has a better phone that they're going to offer as a price. So and that's what called crowd mentality. They're there from a crowd perspective, right? So you want to create brand advocates, it needs to go beyond PBLs, and PBLs will not really help as much as we might think that it would, right? Yeah, but you can say, oh yeah, but these customers been around with us for 1 year, and then they've been spending this much with us. I say yes, it's true. But what if another platform offers double the amount of points, right? You can see that 1 year commitment from them amounts to nothing because they'll just jump ship in that sense, right? So yeah. So they really need to believe in the brand, like what Sufiz says, and they need to find something that's of value that they can't find in the other parts of other brands, in that sense. Yeah.
Right. I think we have another comment in the chat which makes the point of a company in India called Cred, which is a great example of an Indian fintech company that started out as a credit card bill payment app, and it offered a lot of points for doing that, but over time pivoted or transformed into becoming an e-commerce platform, which is now exclusively members only. And so the kind of products and the kind of opportunities I have to interact with them have become very exclusive And so that's one way of PBL starting out as something that did not make a lot of sense, but there was a longer strategy to its eventual use. Which brings me to a point that Sufiz had made earlier, and I'll go first to Ridvan on this. Which Sufiz had talked about how the pandemic has created an opportunity for more gameful experiences, right? And how we all need a little more empathy, a little more fun in our lives now, and we're willing to kind of appreciate that in any small way. So, Ridvan, have you seen that happening in your own work and in your own experience, or is there more of a conscious effort to create more gameful experiences because of the pandemic right now? Does that even feature in conversations?
Yeah, for my work and for my country, I can't say that. But a few days ago, we were talking about a Chinese company, Pindadu, right? And yeah, it's a online shopping company. And when I learned that how they work, and I got really surprised. And I wish we had something like this in Turkey too. And because they focus on somehow community, work together, shop together, and it brings people together. And you have to, I don't know, you have to socialize with people through a shopping app. And it was really clever, and it's a really good idea. And I watched some videos about it, and I didn't have a chance to experience that tool. But unfortunately, I haven't witnessed something like this in Turkey. And we have some successful companies similar to, they do the similar work, but they don't focus on that thing. Probably, okay, so I think probably they earn enough and they don't have a problem, and they don't want to improve their customer experience, customer satisfaction.
Andrew, give me some hope. What?
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that's fair. I mean, I think we're all gathered here to kind of figure out what the reality is, and then acknowledge it to use and develop on it. So, coming to Andrew, then finally, last words to Sufiz. What is the future? What kind of experiences can we design? Or what can we keep in mind as we design experiences for the future, which is a whole new world now after COVID? And is that something that sort of needs to be kept in mind as we design experiences, irrespective of product or service, going forward?
Sorry, Rakshith, can you rephrase your question again so I can understand?
So what kind of experiences can we create in the future using gamification? What can we do to make experiences, customer experiences, more gameful in the future, given where we are today?
Yeah, so I think there are few ways you can do it, right? You can see what's more established, right? Using storylines and using journey maps, and those are things that's more established, right? Or you can create more of a hybrid way where you mix different types of gamification elements in that sense, right? And I think at the end of the day, if you think about it, games, right? It's one of those rare things that transcend time, right? Back in 2008 BC or whatever, there are games, right? Transcends culture, right? Everyone plays games. Transcends gender, transcends whatever it is, transcends. And if you think about it, for games, nobody is forced to play games. Nobody forces us to download certain games that we play on our mobiles. And if you think about it, a game has got to have some really, really great engagement to have it's probably what I call the biggest army of volunteers in the world, right? Because we volunteer ourselves to play a game in that sense. And so this sets the stage to create something that is yeah, something that's great, right? And with metaverse and whatever it is, that's the in thing nowadays, right? Adding games onto that would just move it to a second level in that sense, right? Where it's no longer just right, a space, right? It's what you do with that space and how you can create meaning, and how you can create things in that space and how it interacts with each other, right? Because at the end of the day, a game is something like a symbiotic relationship between assets, between people, between relationships, and that's kind of how it works. So if you want to create great experiences, it's got to go towards that space. Of course, whatever I say is looks very simple, but obviously it's not easy to implement in that sense. That's why most games fail, and only few becomes very good and succeed in a very big sense, right? But that's just the way it is when we talk about putting games into experiences. Yeah.
So essentially, to be more playful, and like I think the previous speaker or Kaito said, to have that mindset of playing and being playful and finding a way to translate that into the experiences that we create for customers. Thank you, Andrew. I'll give the last word to Sufiz. Your thoughts on the future and how we can create more gameful customer experiences.
I think the future for gamification is very bright because the thing is we're getting more and more online, right? We were with social media. Now we're starting to talk about virtual worlds. Yeah, we're not there yet. It's not really that accessible at the moment. It's getting more accessible really quickly though. And the reality is that gamification can be the role of the architect in an experience, right? So you have all these really technologically advanced things coming about, whether it's building virtual worlds or building really great websites and apps and devices. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like having the best contractors. You can build the best building, but if you don't have the best architect, it's just a building with 4 walls, right? So it's about what you put inside that matters. And I find a lot of companies tend to struggle with that. And a lot of my conversations with clients tend to revolve around that. They're like, most of the people I work with are actually developers. They're like, look, we have people who can build great things, but when people use them, they say it really is boring. And we're here to come in to say, look, you can make it better. We can leverage on that technology. And the more technology is introduced, the easier it becomes to gamify more and more things, right? Before this, we say like, look, it's really hard to, the thing about gamification, especially when you talk about game-based learning, is about the tabletop experience, right? It's physical, it's very engaging because you get to hold and feel pieces in your hands. When you bring that online, it's not the same. Playing virtual Monopoly is not as fun and not as, traumatic as playing physical Monopoly with your friends, where you can destroy your friendships together, But when you talk about VR and all that, you get to kind of bridge that gap slowly. And again, I'm not advocating VR. I'm just saying that there's so much technology coming into play. And with all these technological advances, experiences become more important to pull people to the technology. And gamification tends to be the solution to that problem. Whether it's still PBLs that we talked about earlier, it can still play a role, but you give them context with that kind of engaging experience you built with that gamification in mind. Whether it's experiences with a story or experiences with a brand and whatnot. Even nowadays, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies are going online. They're building virtual spaces, virtual offices, and things like that. So it's happening. And gamification, it's a really good place to be in right now. And it's growing more and more. And it's starting to branch outside of L&D. So we talked about earlier on that L&D tends to be the main focus for gamification. And it's still really important because it makes learning less boring, or in fact makes it really fun. But now we're talking about making a technical experience or a virtual or digital experience really, really fun as well. And I think that's really important.
Wonderful. And I love that analogy, and gives me a lot of hope to think of ourselves as architects of designing these experiences. And for all of you out there who are in this wonderful conference to go back with that idea maybe of really looking at our role as architects of these experiences, to look at all the different tools and techniques that are available around us, and then to see, okay, how can we bring playfulness and creativity to that technology and make it that much more fun in its use. Thank you so much, Sufiz. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much, Ridwan. It's been wonderful chatting with all of you. And on that note, I'll hand it over to Albert.
Thank you, Rakshith. Thank you, Ridvan, Sufiz, and Andrew as well for that very interesting panel. So I already saw the topic, and I was like, oh, well, this should be interesting in terms of why is it not caught on? So thank you all for that discussion, and great ending to a very interesting day.